Hey everybody, welcome back. We're live. This is not the JC live show. I guess it kind of is. Um, I'm kind of excited about this because we've been waiting for the return for 287 days, I guess, and it's finally here. So I did a video today that was, I guess, for this channel, highly controversial. There's a lot of people that just got upset. Some people appreciated it, some people didn't. If you didn't watch today's video, check it out. But I'll get into that in just a second. Just want to say hello to a couple of people. Who do we got here? We got Stable Shadow. Thank you for being here. Who else? Ian is here. X Shizzle is here. Unbroken 1010 is here. Who else? No one. I love it. I figure it's going to be light today. Not a lot of people, which, that's fine. It's not a SpaceX Starlink launch. It's not a Starship launch. It is the return of a couple of astronauts that have been up there for quite some time now. Once again, 287 days, which is a really long time considering they were supposed to be there for 8 days, right? We're talking about Williams and Wilmore, right? So these two people, they were, I guess, captain, co-captain, however you want to look at it, pilot, co-pilot, whatever. And they were on, if you guys don't know, some of you do, some of you don't, they were on the Starliner that just didn't work out too well, a Boeing project. And we know Boeing has been having a lot of problems, so to see them with a problem with their Starliner really, it wasn't, shocking, I should say. But it was their inaugural flight, and what ended up happening was there was helium leaks and there was thruster problems and all kinds of stuff. And what Boeing said is, listen, you guys need to stay there, all right, and figure this out for us. So take off your pilot and co-pilot, whatever hat, mission director, whatever. You would take that all off and become engineers and see if we could figure out what these 5 helium leaks have to do with. Why is there 5 helium leaks? It's a good question, right? That's a problem. It's a big problem. Why would you have these leaks? And also, there was, I think it was a total of, out of 28 control thrusters, like 5 of them went bad or something. And what they ended up finding out was it was the Teflon, swollen Teflon. Basically those seals, for high temperature seals, they just couldn't handle the heat. and that was it. The biggest problem, guys, was the helium leaks is obviously an issue, but the biggest problem is the thrusters. And if you have out of 28 thrusters, you have 5 thrusters out. Now your guidance, your yaw, your pitch, your tilt, everything starts kind of getting wacky. You can definitely kill those folks really quick. Because remember, the capsule comes in butt first, let's call it. It's like a cone, and it comes in butt first, okay? Because that's where all that heat shielding is. So it's like a blazing comet as it's coming through the atmosphere. And if it's slightly tilted off angle, right, and that plasma starts pouring off on the sides, it's going to burn up. That's it. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's not rocket science. It is, but it's really not. It's pretty simplistic. It's the same thing that holds true with the Starship, right? The Starship, as it's coming through the air, or through the atmosphere, breaking through, that whole belly of it has all of the shielding on it, whereas the dorsal side, the top side, doesn't, right? That's it. So if it came in like this and all of a sudden its guidance, its thrusters, and we end up with some of them going bad, and now the thing starts pitching and rolling and coming in backwards, it's going to burn up. That's it. So what NASA said was, listen, it is unsafe for you to bring back the 2 astronauts in the Starliner, and that's just it. You could retrieve it and do so autonomously, let it splash down in the ocean, then you can, check it out from there. And that's what they ended up doing. So I believe it was on September 6th, I believe, when they ended up doing that. Either way, they brought it back and they found out that it had to do All the thruster problems, the helium leak, all the rest of this stuff had to do with these Teflon seals. Anyways, that's kind of the skinny of it. But today, 287 days later, they're coming back, which is really good. I mean, I don't know. I've been listening to a lot of what Elon has been saying. I've been listening to what mainstream media has been saying. I've been listening to the president. I've been listening to a lot of the different podcasts that have been speaking on this stuff. I've been reading a lot of the rags, the magazines now, as we call them. So, and they're very biased one way or another. So, and that's what I did this piece on today. And I gave you all of the timeline breakdown of everything that went down, so to speak. Because remember, I've been doing this forever now. Like, what is it, 45 months? And I covered this in August 7th when I did a piece saying that this was going to happen. We heard down the grapevine that, listen, we think that Williams and Wilmore are going to have to come back towards February or March of next year. And then 2 weeks later, NASA said they're going to be coming back February or March next year. So I'm like, oh, well, there you go. So 2 weeks later, they ended up with the official report. So we kind of knew this time frame way back then. But if you listen to the media, we never knew nothing, right? And they've been stranded there for all this time, and no one knows, what's going on or anything else, which is, it's a load of crap. That's just how it is. That's kind of how they spin things. So anyways, we'll get more into detail onto this in just a second. Let me say hello to some more folks. Who do we have here? Richard Turner, thank you for being here. Hello. Fragile is here. Titan 5, Padrat, thank you for being here. Chad, Peter is here. David, thank you, David. Lee Miller. Ricky Joe, how are you doing? Thank you for being here. Let's see. Eric is here. Almonte Observatory. Very cool. Thank you for being here. Mo is in the house. Thank you, Mo. Eric, let me see. Lib Frosty. I like that. And Alan is here. Once again, if you're new here, you've never been on the channel before, if you're looking for SpaceX Starlink stuff, I got you covered. We have over 450 videos I put together so far in the last 45 plus months. Ton of information. Take a look at that if you want to go back even further. I did a Life After Adobe Cutting the Cord series to pull you guys away from Adobe, move you into alternatives. Now I started doing the Life After Microsoft Windows series, cutting the cord from Windows, because we know Windows 10 is end of life, and there's a lot of people that don't want to move to Windows 11 in August or whatever it is when they're taking the hatchet to Windows. So I'm doing a series on that too. So either way, take a look, subscribe, check out everything. There's, once again, tons and tons of information for you to kind of peruse through when we're done here. So let me just real quickly find out if we're still on track as far as the return time. Let me see. Let me flip you guys over. You can see what I'm seeing. Let me see here. There it is. So it says starting at 4:42 p.m. That would be my time. So supposedly in like 3 minutes. When they go live, I'm going to kind of switch to them so that we can hear what they're talking about and see if there's any timing differences. I think they're supposed to come in. I think it was 5:59, 5:57 is when their splashdown was supposed to be. So I don't know. We will see, but we will listen to them in just a minute. Let me go and switch over to here, and you guys can see your chats and whatnot. So if you have a question, put in @JCristina. Before I would say like Q before your question, but the @JCristina on my side pops up like an orange, and I can really see it. So definitely use @JCristina. Peter Gosling's here. Thank you for being here. What's up? What is up? John K. Wolf, thank you for being here. I'm sure you can probably appreciate the last couple of videos I did. Because we know how much you love Elon. And, it's kind of like a little bit unbiased, and that's why it was a little bit controversial, because people, They have a preconceived notion of what to believe and what not to believe, and they listen to mainstream, and mainstream tells them one thing, and and then they believe it. There's a lot of people that are like that. They're like lemmings, and they just follow along, And I've just never been like that. So, as I always say, I'm not always right, and that's fine. I would rather be wrong, so at least I can learn something. And you guys hold me to it, and I do appreciate that. And anyone wants to ask me about that damn bathroom. I did do work on the bathroom, and if you go into the community page on the channel, you will see pictures of some of the bathroom done. Yeah. Fabiola's not here with me because she's having to work a double. But if not, she would tell you that I actually got something done. It happens, rarely, but it does happen. Let me see. Ricky Joe says, sorry I missed you on Friday. I didn't get any notification about you going live. I'm sorry that you did not get notification that I was going live. And, we have about 128,000 people on this channel now. And so many times, I can't count them. How many people say, listen, we're not getting notifications. And then when I tell the YouTube representative, I say, people aren't getting notifications. What the hell is going on over there? They always tell me the exact same thing. Tell your followers to unsubscribe, then subscribe again, and then click the notification button and click all. What do I even say to that? I say thank you, and that's it. And then we just move on to the next question because it's just stupid. Okay, it's just stupid. So anyways, I'm going to tell you, unsubscribe, subscribe again, click the notification button, then click all, because that's what they told me to say. Not that they should fix it. No, absolutely not. You should do that. Anyways, once again, Ricky Joe, sorry. I am truly sorry that you didn't get notification. It's horrible, and I know. Mo says, hey, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for being here, Mo. Appreciate you. Fragile says, could they not have returned sooner aboard the Freedom Capsule? Absolutely. And that's why I've always said that the term rescue and the term stranded are not correct. I mean, they're parabolic. That's what I said in the video today. It's just stupid. In its face, it's stupid. It's like kind of, and when I referenced today in the video, I referenced it to be akin to having two people that boarded a ship to then travel to an island, a deserted island in the middle of the ocean on a boat. The boat springs a leak just as they pull in, and it sinks, right? Now you would say, okay, they're stranded. But if on that deserted island, there's water, there's food, there is shelter, and there's a boat, an emergency vessel, are they still stranded? I would say no. And the same thing holds true here. Once again, August 7th of last year, it was determined that they were going to come back home as they are right now. Nothing has changed. Zero has changed. Now, where Elon Musk gets it right, and I agree with him 100%, is that he states that he asked the previous administration to go and get them. Like, listen, we can go and grab them. Is that okay? And Biden administration said, no, it's not okay. And he feels that that is definitely it's partisan. It is what it is, and it makes sense because remember, they've looked at Elon as being like a proxy of Trump. Hence, they don't want him to do something great. So then it looks really good for Trump. You know what I mean? And that's just it's a game. It's a chess game. And you use lives and people to play your game. That's how government works. Every government works that way. U.S. is nothing different than anywhere else abroad. Okay, people think they get it crooked. They get it all twisted. They think it's different. It's not different. So anyways, he gets it right there. Where it was kind of off, in my personal opinion, is when it was stated that the government said, or Trump said, listen, bring them back sooner, bring them up, bring them back quicker. And he's like, yes, we're going to bring them back quicker. And the bottom line is that it's not quicker. It's the exact same time that was preordained in August when I reported on it, August 7th. And then when it was verified by NASA on August 20th. That's it. You know, it doesn't get deeper than that. It's pretty much that's it. The big thing here, and what I said in today's video, is that Boeing is the one that has gotten a pass here, because you don't hear Boeing in the news all the time, right? You just don't hear it. Like, where are they? It's their broken ship, right? So they received 4.8 billion with a B, big B, right? 4.8 billion from the government. That means from us, taxpayers, right? So they should have been like, you know what? Let's see if we can get them to fix it. We'll change their hat from pilot to co-pilot into engineer. We'll see what the problem is with the helium leak and the thruster problem, and then we'll go and get them, right? We'll call Elon, be like, look, here's a few mil, whatever it's going to take. Let's go grab them, okay? But they didn't do that. They just went silent. And then instead of the news reporting on that, that's all they've been doing is focusing on Elon and Trump and the administration and all the rest of the stuff, right? They're stranded and they're just, you know, they've been abandoned in space. They're lost in space. And it's just, it's comical. But it's not comical because the majority of people believe the shit. And that's what's really comical. But I can't blame people because, you know, as time goes by, you get indoctrinated by, you know, mainstream media, and you believe the stuff that is on every single channel that you watch. Every channel is literally saying the exact same thing. You put on radio and you're hearing the exact same thing. So if you don't do your due diligence and find out what exactly is going on, you end up like the rest of the lemmings. Like I said today, kind of like walking over the cliff, you know? Yeah, heel and toe. You know, anyways, so that's kind of it. It's kind of crazy, but I'm really happy that they're coming back. One thing that Elon said, he was on, I liked what he said on Rogan. He was on Rogan's show. Then he was also on, whose show was he on? He was on Ted Cruz. He has his own podcast now. Everyone has a podcast, right? When I started podcasting 16 years ago, doing Digital Photography Cafe, no one even knew what a podcast was. And I couldn't even get you, the people, to find me because we were on Apple and they didn't know, like, how do you do it? What do you have to do? What the hell is a podcast? How do I download you? How do I listen to you? It was like a big thing. And we used to travel and cover industry. Anyways, I digress. Anyways, on Ted Cruz, right? So that podcast, he said something that was, you know, kind of interesting and probably true. He said there's 2 astronauts on board that we're bringing back, right? That were there for 287 days. And one is a Democrat and one is a Republican. And I guarantee you each one will view this differently. Think about it, right? It's just in the eye of the beholder. Whoever looks at it is going to just see it different. One will be like, oh my God, we've been here forever. The other will be like, oh yes, everything's fine. You know, this is great or whatever. Everyone has a different view on it. And that's the way it should be. You know, it's just, I want to just know the facts and then decide for myself. And the problem is it's very hard to find the facts today. Very hard. So anyways, let me see who else is here. Then I want to get into some more questions before they go live. Supposedly it says here 4:42. Let me refresh that page. And still if it says, no, it looks like they're going live. All right, let me go ahead and hit it. Here we go. And we can listen to them. Let's see.
Made a short flight on board Dragon to the International Space Station in September. Both veterans of long-duration station missions, both Williams and Wilmore, conducted spacewalks during their 9 months in space. Having had the capacity to leave the station at any point, had there been some type of emergency, the crew members began packing for their voyage home about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with the newly arrived Crew 10 team, who arrived just a few days ago.
For return operations such as this, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to mariners in advance of and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones.
Now, we do want to stress to the public the need to respect
Rich.
this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous task, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts and Dragon, the teams working to recover them from the water.
Lib Frosty, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate you. Thank
The
you.
crew and your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch as we'll be bringing you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
And they will be the best views that you can get. So let's take a minute to meet our returning crew. U.S. Space Force Colonel Nick Hague is your Crew 9 commander. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This was his second spaceflight to the International Space Station and third launch overall. He spent 171 days in space with Crew 9 and has a career total of 374 days in space. During his mission, he completed a spacewalk with astronaut Suni Williams. That was his fourth spacewalk, earning him a career total of 25 hours, 56 minutes of spacewalking time. Before Crew 9, Hague previously served as a crew member of Expedition 59 and 60 back in 2019. He flew with Alexei Ovchinin and NASA's Christina Cook.
Thank you, Peter, for the gifted memberships. If you got a membership from Peter, that's Lotus, D. Adams, Victor, Petrie, and Drone OK, as well as George. Please say thank you to Peter.
He voluntarily
Peter, thank you
transferred
so much.
from the United
Appreciate
States
you.
Air Force to U.S. Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife, Katie, is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons.
NASA astronaut Suni Williams is a mission specialist for Crew 9. This was her third visit to the space station. She originally launched aboard Boeing Starliner spacecraft and arrived at the space station on June 6th. And it looks like we are beginning to get some views inside the spacecraft, overlooking the shoulders of the crew on board Dragon. We'll continue to bring you those views throughout the day and views throughout splashdown this morning, or this afternoon rather. But to jump back into a little bit more about Suni, she became an Expedition 71-72 crew member, and she logged 286 days in space on this mission. But she actually has a total of 608 days in space, the second most time in space by a U.S. astronaut. Former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson ranks first for the U.S. with 675 days in space. She conducted 2 spacewalks and has completed 9 over the course of her career for a total of 62 hours and 6 minutes of spacewalking time. She ranks 4th on the list of cumulative time spacewalking by a female astronaut. And she has flown on 4 different spacecraft types, including the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, she served on Expedition 14 and 15 in 2006 and 2007, and again with Expedition 32 and 33 in 2012. She's a retired U.S. Navy captain and is a proud graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy.
NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore is also serving as a mission specialist today. This is his 3rd spaceflight and, just like Suni, logged 286 days in space. He conducted 1 spacewalk and completed 5 over the course of his career, earning him a total spacewalking time of 21 hours, 2 minutes. He's flown on 4 different spacecraft types throughout his career: the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, the Mount Juliet, Tennessee native served on STS-129 in 2009 and Expedition 41 and 42 from 2014 to 2015. Wilmore is also retired, a retired captain in the U.S. Navy.
And Alexander Gorbanov is a 3rd mission specialist serving on today's mission. Crew 9 was his very first spaceflight to the space station, earning him a total of 171 days in space over the course of his career. Gorbanov, along with Nick Hague, saw the arrival of 4 visiting vehicles and saw the departure of 4 as well. The duo orbited the Earth more than 2,700 times during their mission. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, Gorbanov worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
To prepare for upcoming events, Dragon is currently doing a couple of things autonomously. First, it's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon very comfortable for Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander during the reentry phase. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate data, power, and fluid connections between the spacecraft and the trunk in preparation for that trunk separation that I mentioned earlier. Now, as we saw before, we are hoping to get more views inside of the Dragon capsule. We will bring those, of course. We want to see more of our four crew members. But now a bit more of the Dragon Freedom capsule. It has flown on several missions for NASA. It first launched April 27th, 2022. To the International Space Station on NASA's SpaceX Crew 4 mission. It was subsequently used for 2 private spaceflight missions to the space station for Axiom Space, Axiom Mission 2 in May 2023, and Axiom Mission 3 in January of 2024. And of course, Crew 9 launched last year, is September 28th. So yeah, a little bit about the Dragon Freedom capsule. Here, a view that we have once again between the shoulders of Commander Nick Hague, who is on the left-hand side of your screen there, and Mission Specialist Alexander Gorbanov there on the right.
That's right, Kate. And the next major milestone that we're looking ahead towards this afternoon is claw separation. We're targeting that claw separation at 2:05 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon, so less than 10 minutes from now. Continuing to get some views inside Dragon Freedom. To the far left there is NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore. And as you can see, the crew is suited up in their space suits. They are suited up in what we call dynamic phases of flight. So when they launch, when they dock, when they undock, when they return back for splashdown. We might hear some call outs on the loops about putting their visors down. That will happen just prior to deorbit burn. And you'll hear us pause when some of those communications happen. That's because we want to make sure that we are relaying the best information to you all, and so that you hear it as well. So if you do hear us pause, that is what we're doing. You also see they have their gloves on there, and I know the gloves are pretty unique on the Dragon spacesuits, right? They're custom created?
Yes, the spacesuit overall is custom fit for each astronaut. These gloves enable usage of the touchscreen panels that they have in front of them. We can't see it from this view, but that view we saw earlier between Alexander Gorbanov and Nick Hague, that is a touchscreen. It allows the crew to monitor everything that Dragon is doing, along with those tablets that they have there on their legs. So yeah, the spacesuit itself is intended to act as a mini spaceship, if you will, as once the visors are closed, it is able to maintain a pressure in the unlikely event of a depressurization event for Dragon. So there we can see those screens I was talking about. So there in the center, we've got the location tracker, as well as on the left-hand side, it's mapping out the operations that Dragon is executing. The crew has to remain well informed of all these things that Dragon is doing autonomously. That basically means that Dragon is flying itself. The crew has the ability to gain control of the capsule if necessary, but the capsule is essentially going to bring itself home. But of course, in order to be familiar with
Freedom, SpaceX, deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes.
There you go, deorbit in 5.
Freedom capsule.
And so we did hear that call out for the deorbit sequence start to begin here in 5 minutes.
So they're actually 6 minutes early on the deorbit.
Resource engineer here in Hawthorne, mission control just behind us, and that went up to Commander Nick Hague. He's going to be doing the majority of the communications during the flight downhill today through splashdown, and they'll be communicating with the core all along the way. Now, we did mention that they are flying on Crew Dragon Freedom. The naming of spacecraft has gone all the way back to the very beginning of this human spaceflight program. This is a nod to Alan Shepard naming his spacecraft Freedom 7 during the Mercury program. And so the crew that first flew up on Freedom a few years ago had the opportunity to name this Dragon, and they named it Freedom. That was Crew 4 that was the first flyers on this spacecraft. It's also flown for Axiom Mission 2 and 3, and then, of course, today for Crew 9 as well.
Yeah, actually, fun fact about this particular capsule, of those 4 missions that Sandra just mentioned, we have seen daytime splashdowns for 2 of those. Today will mark the third of the third daytime splashdown. So there's something lucky about this particular capsule that gets daytime splashdowns. Nighttime is great because we can see even more clearly the capsule streaking through, but I personally love the daylight views because we really get even better views of the recovery team operations during that phase of the mission.
Yes, absolutely. And if you follow along with our missions, you'll know that sometimes weather is a watch item when it comes to undocking and splashdown. We just splash down in the water, so we want to ensure that parameters like wave heights and wind speeds and precipitation, lightning, all of that is looking good for the crew and the safety of those recovery personnel. And today the weather is just pristine. We got off of space station on the very first attempt. So I'm joking around and saying that it was because it was St. Patrick's Day and we got really lucky with the weather.
I wouldn't disagree with that. Speaking of weather, we will be hearing from core probably around 2:20-ish. Typically, before we enter the period of loss of signal, or LOS, we will hear an entry briefing from the core, the crew operations resource engineer, and they will deliver important information like updated anticipated splashdown and loss of signal times to the crew, as well as the wave height and wind speed. So we'll be standing by to listen in on those. Like I said, that will happen shortly after.
What's kind of interesting, guys, is that the deorbit burn happens, let's say right around on Eastern time, let's say about 5:11, somewhere on there, deorbit burn. And literally the time, that 5:11 period of time to the time that they are on the ground is only like about maybe 40 minutes. It doesn't take that long to get back down. So they do the deorbit burn. A few minutes later, they close that cone, the top, and then they're just shooting through. And it's amazing how quick it ends up being. It's not a long period of time.
Hours since Dragon undocked from the International Space Station. The team there in mission control, there are multiple teams, in fact, and they cycle through shifts to ensure that everybody gets the required rest and sleep periods, just like the astronauts on board. That crew operations and resource engineer is seated there in the room, and that, like Sandra said, is the primary voice that we'll be hearing communicate from the SpaceX team to the crew on board.
That's right. And so it looks like we're about 3 minutes or so from the claw separation portion of today's flight. The claw is a portion on the spacecraft that holds the trunk to Dragon. Following claw separation, we're going to jettison or remove that trunk because it's no longer needed. The trunk has solar arrays on it that provides power to the Dragon spacecraft. But now that we're beginning the reentry process, we need to go ahead and jettison that trunk and able to expose the heat shield, which is really going to do the heavy lifting as Crew 9 re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. They come in at 17,500 miles per hour, so they really need to ensure that that heat shield absorbs that heat. And there's
Deorbit sequence start.
There you go.
And so we did just get communications there that the deorbit sequence start has begun. So here in just a couple minutes from now, we expect to hear information or a call back about the claw separation having begun. And again, that kicks off that trunk separation portion that I was discussing to remove that, expose the heat shield, and then eventually we'll have the deorbit burn. And we'll continue to walk you through all of these milestones as we approach them ahead of our splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon, off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
Yeah, we're very excited to bring the Crew 9 crew home. Sandra, we were talking about the trunk separation. That trunk is on a trajectory that will re-enter in the atmosphere and break up upon that re-entry. The heat shield itself is one of my favorite parts of the Dragon capsule. It is the workhorse of the re-entry phase. It will work to protect the Dragon capsule and the crew members on board during the re-entry phase as the temperatures outside of the capsule build up to, I believe, about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit in excess of. And meanwhile, the interior of Dragon stays a very comfortable temperature. That heat shield does a lot of the work, and we'll see that plasma build up on the exterior of the capsule. As a result of the plasma that builds up, we will lose communications with the crew. This is known as loss of signal, or LOS. This is roughly a 10-minute period on average, even less than. I believe today it is probably about 6 or 7 minutes long. It kind of depends on the mission, and it happens for every Dragon capsule that re-enters the atmosphere. Due to that plasma buildup, we're not able to communicate or command the capsule, so we stand by while we wait to regain communication.
Midcoast had a question about the craft. Does it come in under pilot's control, or is it fully automated? And the Freedom will be coming back fully automated. It's autopilot. They're not controlling it. It's fully autopilot.
It'll be just about a minute or so after that. That happens pretty rapidly in succession. Some of our milestones will take a little bit longer throughout the day. For example, we will have a deorbit burn after that will take about 7.5 minutes and helps get Dragon set up in the right trajectory to splash down in the Gulf off the coast of Florida. So continuing to stand by for claw separation.
Well, while they're standing by, once again, if you have any questions, put at JCristina before the question. It'll pop up and it'll be a lot easier for me to see. Let's see. Unbroken says, do you watch Everyday Astronaut? Kind of interesting channel. Yes, awesome channel. Great information there. Let me see what else here. Once again, put an at JCristina if you have a question.
That trunk has been jettisoned from the Dragon capsule. So the cloth was separated. That's the mechanism that connects the telemetry and power between the Dragon capsule and the trunk. In order to expose the heat shield underneath Dragon, we had to jettison that trunk. And so we just got confirmation that that has happened. So that is great news. Basically means that telemetry is looking good and that the nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield, like I said, is now exposed and ready for atmospheric reentry. The trunk served its purpose by gathering energy from the sun through its solar cells and converting that to battery power. Since we separated the trunk, we can't generate any more new power, but we really don't need to since we're coming home and Dragon has enough battery power already stored. Now, up next, the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to reentry: the slew, or the maneuver to deorbit burn attitude, and then the deorbit burn itself. This deorbit burn is the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the 4 thrusters located on top of the spacecraft under the nose cone, it's the last time that they will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of Florida, off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, and that will last about 7.5 minutes once it starts.
We're about 3 minutes to the deorbit burn.
And so deorbit burn is targeted for 2:11 p.m. Central Time, so about 2 minutes from now. As we mentioned, it's going to last about 7.5 minutes, again, helping to get Dragon into the precise trajectory to ensure that splashdown occurs in the area that was calculated and where the recovery team is already in place, ready to support splashdown operations today. The recovery vessel Megan is the ship that is going to be utilized today, and we also have what is called fast boats that go out first to check the spacecraft and make sure everything is looking good before the recovery vessel Megan approaches. So that whole recovery process takes about an hour, I would say, from the time the crew splashes down to the time they're on the boat and the crew gets out of the capsule. And we'll continue to bring you live coverage through every step of the way today as Crew 9 returns home.
Indeed. Now, let's take a little bit of a closer look at Dragon. One of the great things about being close to the space station is that we can use space station cameras to look at Dragon. But now that Dragon is on its way home, we don't have those external cameras. So here's an animation of what the capsule looks like. We've got the pressurized section, the capsule on the top, and the trunk or the unpressurized section on the bottom. That's where those solar panels that we manufacture in-house are located, soaking up the energy from the sun and turning it into power for the capsule. At the very top of the capsule is the nose cone. That is where the Dracos, the forward Dracos are located. That nose cone is currently open, not closed like we saw in that animation. Once we get through the final maneuverings for the re-entry phase, we will close the nose cone capsule just before Dragon begins its atmospheric entry to protect that forward hatch there located along with those forward Dracos. So
it's about 5 minutes
That's
into
right.
the
I was going
deorbit
to
when they
mention
close
that
the hatch.
nose
About 5
cone
minutes into
does
it.
open shortly after launch, and it remains open the entire time that Dragon is docked to the International Space Station. So as an example for this particular spacecraft, Freedom, since September when it docked to the International Space Station, remains open that entire time, and here shortly it will close for the very first time since September.
So quick recap of what Dragon has done in recent history here. We basically began preparations for re-entry known as the Deorbit sequence. So Dragon released the trunk. As we said before, we separated the claw, we released the trunk. It next will slew to the deorbit burn attitude. Slew basically meaning maneuver, so it will position itself correctly to execute that deorbit burn. We want the heat shield side to be facing forward or first, if you will. We want that to be the leading edge of the Dragon capsule, as that heat shield is meant to basically be an ablative material for the heat that it will incur. Once we complete that deorbit burn attitude slew, we will initiate the deorbit burn itself. That will last for several minutes, expecting that to be to start here any moment now, actually, and then it will go until about 2:18 p.m. Pacific time or 5:18 p.m. Eastern time.
And I did hear confirmation that that deorbit burn is underway. As we mentioned, it's about a 7.5 minute burn. So within the last 10 minutes, Dragon has jettisoned its trunk and initiated the deorbit burn just seconds ago. As mentioned earlier, for those operations, NASA and SpaceX closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued.
About 10 minutes from now, they'll close the cone up at about 5:22 Eastern time. And at that point, that's when things start getting hot, so to speak.
So we do want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases the risk to not only the astronauts in Dragon, but the teams working to recover them from the water and the safety of those that may come too close. So for the safety of the crew, which you see there on your screen, your safety, we recommend you sit back and watch as we'll continue to bring you the best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that we will utilize our 4 forward Draco thrusters. Forward basically meaning at the top of the Dragon capsule. Dragon Freedom has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site right off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. So basically, it is the last burn that the Dragon spacecraft executes and is what really locks it in for that precise landing. As you can see on your screen right now, Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration.
That's a great question about is there an app to track the craft while it's coming in or where
Means
it is?
until Deorbit
And there
burn
is an
termination.
online
As I
place
mentioned
you can
earlier,
go. And what
Dragon
I'll do
is
in
flying
the chat
itself.
right now, if you
So
go take a
all
look
the
at
crew
it,
has to
it's
do is stay strapped into their seats and keep tabs on things. Although I must say, if I had one of those window
Once again,
seats,
SpaceX.com
it would be pretty difficult to restrain
follow
myself.
dash
Now,
Dragon.
with Nick,
Check it
Sunny,
out,
Butch, and
you will
Alexander
see
ready
where
to
they are,
deorbit and
real time.
splashdown to one of 8 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of America or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. For those of you following along, you'll know that today's splashdown marks our final Dragon recovery on the East Coast. After 6 great years of successful recovery operations off the East Coast, we'll be moving all Dragon recovery operations back to the West Coast.
And as always, NASA and SpaceX jointly select our splashdown location. And for today, the prime recovery site is off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory or path that it follows, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedules for the returning crew members, as well as, of course, the big one, the weather.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for reentry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them, of course. Trajectory and ballistic experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternative sites while in a free flight if sudden weather moves in that we may need to avoid. So, as we mentioned, weather is something we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. So for the Crew 9 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or a chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside Dragon and the recovery teams in the water. And we're also looking for wind speeds to be less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so that we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying today, we had a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we were in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which has just about a minute or so left in it. And this is the last burn in the trip home that commits Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Now, we are currently waiting to conclude the deorbit burn. We've got less than a minute until that finishes. We will expect to hear a call out for nominal burn, which will confirm completion of that deorbit burn for Dragon Freedom. We can see images there from the touchscreen display panels that the crew utilizes in flight. We can see the visualization of exactly which one of the 4 forward Draco thrusters are firing. That's why you have kind of like a strobe effect there.
And if you're just joining us, you are looking at live views of the Dragon Freedom. On your left is Commander of Crew 9, Nick Hague. To his right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grabenkin. And also in Gorbunov, excuse me, that is Alexander Gorbunov. And then also in the capsule today is NASA astronaut Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore. We're awaiting confirmation that their deorbit burn is complete, which is the last burn that's going to help set them up on a trajectory to splashdown off the coast of Florida.
Deorbit burn complete. Performance
There you go.
nominal. Nose cone closure initiated.
Perfect.
Freedom copies.
All right, excellent news there. We heard the words we were looking for, nominal burn. So that means that that deorbit burn was successful and nominal, meaning as expected. And we're now beginning to close the nose cone in preparation for atmospheric reentry.
So in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for reentry. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge, which will help keep Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander cool and comfortable during reentry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes from now. At this point, the nose cone is closing and protecting the forward hatch for reentry, and the crew are using their screens to continue to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. And as we mentioned earlier, that nose cone has remained open since September, so this is the first time it's closing in a few months.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, we will be expecting, as I mentioned before, an entry brief from SpaceX Core. Again, that's the crew operations resource engineer who is seated in that room that you see there on your screen. That entry brief will provide updated times for anticipated splashdown as well as the loss of signal or a period of LOS. And that briefing will also give us information such as wind speed and wave height at the expected splashdown location. But all in all, everything has been great today. All events have been executed on time as expected, and we are looking forward to a splashdown of the Crew 9 crew at about 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time or 2:57 p.m. Pacific Time. Between now and then, things are going to start moving quite quickly. In fact, if anything, this will have seemed like the slower part of the reentry phase. We're going to go through, like I said, that period of loss of signal or LOS. That period is a few minutes long where we are unable to communicate or command the capsule due to the plasma that builds up on the exterior of the capsule. That period, like I said, lasts for a couple minutes. You will start to hear SpaceX Core hail the Crew 9 crew a little bit earlier than expected because we, in the past, have actually regained communications a couple minutes earlier than initially anticipated. So we'll go through that period of loss of signal, that entry period, that specifically when when the Dragon spacecraft is re-entering through the atmosphere. Approximately at about 18,000 feet when the capsule is traveling at 350 miles per hour. We will see our first views of parachutes for the day. It's one of my favorite moments of return sequences is when we get to see the drogue parachutes. We'll see the drogues come out. Those drogues will help slow the vehicle down to about 119 miles per hour. And then that is when the main parachutes will come out from the Dragon spacecraft and then ultimately end in splashdown.
And we are hearing confirmation that the nose cone is closed and everything was nominal or as expected with that closure.
I just got a question on another social media feed asking if the Dragon has SpaceX Starlink built into it. And the answer is yes, guys. Each one, the Freedom does have SpaceX Starlink, and it's used for communications. So pretty cool.
Degrees Fahrenheit as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. So the heat shield is pointing forward, leading Dragon to the landing site.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. The first-gen PICA was initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop Pika-X, which was the second-generation product used on all Dragon 1 cargo resupply service missions
And that's
that were
proprietary to
resupplied the
SpaceX.
International Space Station on 20 missions. Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal capabilities that allowed the heat shield to be even more effective in the way that it utilized the ability to make that heat ablevate as it goes through the Earth's atmosphere.
That was one of the questions you guys asked about, and yes, it does not use the same type of ceramic tiles that the Starship or something or Falcon would use. They do not use that.
Composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite structure during reentry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
While Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees during peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection system coupled with the environmental control and life support system in the pressurized interior will ensure that Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
Now, if you've just recently joined us, we hope to regain views of our crew members inside Dragon Freedom, but we don't have those available at the moment due to ground station coverage. So we will bring those back to you.
We have about T-minus 25 minutes, 28 minutes before the initial parachute deployment. So hang in there.
Will be the 2 drogue parachutes, followed by the 4 main parachutes, and those will guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since it launched back in September. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they're at the right speed and altitude.
Vehicle velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. Now, when the vehicle velocity at main deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 6,500 feet. When Dragon splashes down in the water, the vehicle velocity will be about 16 miles per hour, so you can really see how those parachutes help to slow down the crew inside the capsule. The highest G-load the crew is expected to experience today is about 3 to 5 Gs.
Yeah, when you think about really fun roller coasters, they're about in that range. So I'm sure that our crew on board will be well equipped to experience those Gs. It's nothing for them. They go through much more intense training.
And so we are continuing to make our way through a number of miles.
It's amazing how the vehicle starts out at over 17,000 miles per hour. It's crazy.
Is secure for entry.
So the cone is now closed up,
Freedom
shut.
Caps.
All right, great news there. That tells us that the final physical configuration change for Dragon is complete. We have closed that nose cone. This is the last physical change that Dragon undergoes prior to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's important that that nose cone is completely closed because underneath it is not only where the 4 forward Draco thrusters are located, but it's also because that is where the forward hatch is located. That is the hatch that is utilized for the crew to ingress and egress from the station while it is docked on board. And since our capsules are flight proven and we reuse them on future space flights, we want to make sure that all of the integrity of that hardware remains intact. So that nose cone is successfully closed, and we're going to start moving pretty quickly here. As I mentioned before, we'll go through loss of signal. We'll get that signal back several minutes later, and then we'll see the parachute action.
Yep, and then that's all ahead of splashdown off the coast of Florida. We're targeting Tallahassee as our splashdown zone today at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Now, you did mention the call to the crew. They'll do some additional calculations following that burn and potentially let us know if that splashdown time has changed at all. But right now, we are continuing to target 2:57 p.m. And you can see there on
So
your
they're on-
screen a path of
they're on
where
target.
Dragon will be re-entering today. So if you are in the southern tip of Mexico, you might have the opportunity to see Dragon. Because it's a daytime splashdown, you probably won't have too great of views, but potentially you'll have the opportunity to get a glimpse of it.
Someone asked, where do you think Elon Musk is watching this from? And chances are it's probably in Hawthorne, the Hawthorne site, Mission Control. That's probably where he is right now.
SpaceX Mission Control, located here in Hawthorne, California. That is also where the crew operations and resource engineer is seated. That person is the voice that we have heard multiple times and will continue to hear as the primary point of contact to the crew on board Dragon Freedom. We will also hear the voice of Commander Nick Hague. Basically, after we hear the Corps communicate something, we will hear Nick Hague indicate that they copy, that they heard the message well, some sort of recognition that the message was received.
And if you
Thank you for
joined us
that,
yesterday
Dutch Linux.
for our
You turned
coverage
it up just a little
during
bit.
the undocking, we were communicating through something that's called a big loop. We do that when we're in integrated operations with the International.
Freedom, SpaceX, for entry sequence. Report when ready to copy.
There we go.
Ready to copy.
All right, I've got some updated times for you. Our comm blackout start time is 2144. Our comm blackout end time is 2151. And our splashdown time is the same per your displays, 2157.
Everything's on track. 6-minute blackout time.
Okay. Understand comm blackout start 2144, stop 2151, splashdown per display.
That's a good read back. And with that, please report when tablets are secured behind the elastic bands, restraints are tight, and visors are down.
I love it, guys. Put your seats up. Put your visors down. Your trays need to be secured. I love it. I love it.
And with that communication from the Corps or Crew Operations Resource Engineer here in Hawthorne to Commander Nick Hague of Crew Dragon Freedom, we did hear that the loss of signal period is still at 2:44 p.m. Pacific, but we had a 1-minute adjustment to the acquisition of signal. That's going to now be at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time. However, our splashdown time remains the same at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time.
And once again, the reason why they're blacked out has to do with the plasma that's just going to be pouring off the thing. So it's very hard to communicate when there's that much plasma interfering.
As we mentioned before, we are splashing down on the Gulf Coast. We have ability to splash down on either side of Florida, but the location site just outside of Tallahassee, Florida, is the site that was selected today due to best recovery conditions. And as Sandra mentioned before, weather is always a watch item, but everything is looking great for that particular recovery location. So I'm sure once we start getting views from the recovery vessel, I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty beautiful afternoon.
I remember that NASA channel that you're referring to. That's from Midcoast. And yeah, I used to watch the space shuttle all the time on that. And
altitude planes
not
that
available.
NASA utilizes during
watch it on
splashdown
cable.
operations. Those are en route and going to be tracking the capsule as it makes its way through the atmosphere and should be providing some good views for us. Kate and I were just chatting about how we haven't had a daytime splashdown in a little while, so we're looking forward to the views along with you.
Yeah.
No, Wes, it lands in the ocean. It's going to land in the Gulf of America, but it's just outside of Tallahassee.
Sandra, you said earlier daylight will be a little bit less bright, but we will definitely be able to see the SpaceX recovery team operations much clearer. I could also imagine it's probably a little bit easier for the team themselves to do their work in daytime than at nighttime.
For sure.
We'll see them rush in really quickly with a couple of fast boats as they begin the initial safety checks and sweeps of the Dragon capsule, while also retrieving the parachutes from the surface of the ocean. The recovery vessel, the main recovery vessel, will continue to make its way closer to the Dragon capsule. It is stationed a couple miles away from the actual recovery location, the splashdown location, for obvious safety purposes. So it takes a little while for that vessel to make its way over, but once it's closer, we'll have even better views of those recovery operations.
And you may be wondering why sometimes we splash down in the daytime versus the nighttime. And believe me, we would all love for these operations to happen during regular daytime working hours. But unfortunately, orbital mechanics just doesn't quite work out that way. So it has to deal with the location of the International Space Station, as well as where the splashdown zone is on Earth and that trajectory, as well as the phasing. So as we mentioned earlier, sometimes we have phasing as short as 6 hours, sometimes in excess of 30+ hours. It just depends on where the targeted area is that the capsule is going to splash down. So today's phasing has been 17 hours since undocking occurred at 10:05 p.m. Pacific yesterday evening for us here in Hawthorne. Early wee hours for folks on the East Coast and other areas of the United States.
Yeah, but regardless of whether it's daytime or nighttime, the SpaceX recovery team has trained and practiced and rehearsed for it all. So regardless of daylight, they are really efficient with those operations. And but like you said, Sandra, it has been a minute since we have seen a daytime splashdown on a NASA SpaceX crew mission. The last daytime recovery was on Crew 4, which was the debut flight for the capsule flying today, the spacecraft known as Dragon Freedom. And so yeah, kind of a fun fact there in terms of the timing of that daylight splashdowns. Once again, standing by for more communication with the crew. The next event that we have coming up is the start of that period known as loss of signal. That is the period still expected at 2:44 p.m. Pacific time. This lasts for several minutes while the capsule is making its way through the Earth's atmosphere, the heat shield located at the bottom of the capsule, really doing all the work at that point in time in terms of using the atmosphere to slow the capsule down from its orbital speeds of 17,500 miles per hour.
Our tablets are secure, restraints are tightened, visors down. We are configured for entry.
There you
Freedom, I copied. Tablets are secured, restraints are tight, and visors down.
go. And trays are stowed.
All right, great news there in terms of continuing to make progress. That back and forth communication we heard was just letting Core know that
Just so you guys know, there was a question about what do they have to do before popping the hatch, so to speak, and they secure the capsule and they put on like this platform and they vent out any type of gases like toxic gases and all this type of thing. They do a crew health check from external to the caps. Everything's going good, everything's fine. Then they give them the go ahead to pop the latch. It's not like explosive to pop it. It's actually latch.
As an astronaut in 2013. This was his second spaceflight to the International Space Station and third launch overall. He spent 171 days in space with Crew 9 and has a career total of 374 days in space.
Sweet.
During his mission, he completed a spacewalk with astronaut Sonny Williams. That was his fourth spacewalk, earning him a career total of 25 hours, 56 minutes of spacewalking time. Before Crew 9, Haig previously served as
So guys, we have what do we got now? Maybe about 10, 12, 15, about 15 minutes or so, and we should be good. They should be in the ocean. So this is good. This is really good. Everything is going as planned. Everything's nominal, as they would say. So that's really, really good. No problems, so to speak. Someone asked where Elon would be watching. Of course, it'd be from Hawthorne. So in their Mission Control in California is most likely where he is sitting right now, watching this all happen. Chances are he's very vocal, so he's probably going to he'll probably talk or do something over on X. So you can always watch him on x.com/Elon Musk, and you'll be able to see anything that he puts on there, which is kind of cool. If you want to keep up with what's going on. Also, like I said before, if you want to know exactly where the Dragon is, you can go to spacex.com/follow-dragon. Once again, spacex.com/follow-dragon. And you'll be able to see exactly their location as of right now. So they're getting close.
1:51.
5 minutes until blackout, comms blackout. So 5 minutes. So we were at 39. So it'd be 44. And then I believe it's like a 6-minute blackout, 7-minute
And with
blackout.
that call out from the crew operations resource engineer to Commander Nick Hague, letting them know that everything is looking good ahead of the loss of signal period. We will see the crew on the other side of the loss of signal period at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Continuing on about Sunny Williams, who has a total of 608 days in space, the second most time in space by a U.S. astronaut. Former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson actually ranks first for the U.S. with 675 days in space. Sunny conducted 2 spacewalks and has completed 9 over the course of her career for a total of 62 hours, 6 minutes of spacewalking time. She ranks 4th on the list of cumulative time spacewalking by a female astronaut, and she has flown on 4 different spacecraft types, including the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, she served on Expedition 14 and 15 in 2006 and 2007, and again with Expedition 32 and 33 in 2012. She's a retired U.S. Navy captain and is a proud graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and was the first astronaut to run a marathon in space.
Pretty awesome stuff.
It's pretty cool.
Now, NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore is also serving as a mission specialist today. This is his 3rd spaceflight and, just like Sunny, logged 286 days in space. He conducted 1 spacewalk and completed 5 over the course of his career, earning him a total spacewalking time of 21 hours and 2 minutes. He's flown on 4 different spacecraft types throughout his career: the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, Starliner, and now Dragon. Previously, the Mount Juliet, Tennessee native served on STS-129 in 2009 and Expedition 41 and 42 from 2014 to 2015. Wilmore is also a retired captain in the U.S. Navy.
Next up is Alexander Gorbunov, who is the 3rd mission specialist serving on today's mission. Crew 9 was his first space flight to the space station.
If you guys have any questions, put in at JCristina in the chat, and I'll try to jump in there. And I'm going to keep letting them talk and not kind of talk over them. So if there's something that pops up and I see it, I will jump in.
Orbited the Earth more than 2,700 times since September. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, Gorbunov worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. So if you are just joining us, we are continuing to bring you live coverage of Crew 9's return to Earth following their mission aboard the International Space Station, where they completed science and research investigations. We are targeting splashdown off the coast of Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. The next major milestone that we'll look ahead towards is what we call loss of signal, or LOS, when we won't have communications with the crew because they will be re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And during this process, there is plasma that builds up around that heat shield, so we are not able to communicate with the crew, but we are anticipating to regain communications with the crew at a short time from now at
So comms go down in 1 minute, is what she's saying, and it'll be gone for about 6 minutes, 7 minutes. So by right around 7 minutes from then, we'll be able to hear from them again.
Go into that period of loss of signal. Once we get views of the crew inside the capsule, once again, we will be sure to bring those to you. But that period of time is when plasma is building up on the exterior of the capsule, generating heat in excess of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are unable to communicate or command the spacecraft at that time. And that includes, unfortunately, video feeds as well. So as soon as we get the views back inside Dragon, we will bring those to you. But until then, we are going to stand by and continue to monitor the progress of Dragon. Like Sandra just said, we are anticipating the blackout period to begin at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time, 5:51 p.m. Eastern time. This will last
Actually,
for
what she
several
means
minutes.
is the blackout
It's
period will
not
be
super
over
exact, even though
at
we are
51.
predicting
Blackout
acquisition of
starts now.
signal, or AOS, to come back at 5:51 p.m. Eastern time. In the past, we have regained communication sometimes a little bit earlier than that, so we'll probably start to hear Core begin to hail Crew Dragon a minute or two prior to that anticipated acquisition of signal. But right now, Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander are seated in their seats inside Dragon Freedom. Their visors are down, and they have put away or stored the tablets they had located on their upper leg to monitor Dragon's progress. Now they will be utilizing the touchscreen displays where the current operation and future operations will be displayed as they are able to monitor Dragon's progress continually. As I said before, Dragon is autonomous, meaning it is flying itself. So the crew stands by and monitors, and those touchscreen displays are what will be allowing them to do so and prepare for events such as parachute deploy.
So that's a good question. Can I see it? Because I'm here in Florida, and the answer to that is no, I can't. Now, when the space shuttle would come in, we would be able to see it because it would come in here on the Space Coast. All right, it would come in through Kennedy Space Center. And matter of fact, when the shuttle blew up, we actually saw it blow up where I was, and it was not a happy scene. So, but this one we will not be able to see because it's on the West Coast towards the top of the state, landing in the Gulf of America. So.
Being
Good
done
question.
on
Thank you.
Parkinson's, on osteoporosis, on cancer research, and a variety of other studies. Additionally, the microgravity laboratory provides a jumping off point for us as we venture back to the moon and onto Mars through longer duration space flights. One such example that the crew worked on during this mission was an alternative exercise device. In microgravity, the crew has to exercise for about 2 hours a day because they're not having the effects of gravity on their body. So to prevent bone and muscle loss, we counteract that with 2 hours of exercise per day. On board the International Space Station, they have 3 ways in which they can exercise. They have a bike, they have a treadmill, and they have a similar to a weightlifting machine that counteracts the microgravity environment. But a particular experiment that this crew tested out was a combination of all 3 of those in one smaller device. And this is really critical as we continue on to the moon, Mars, and beyond, because space is really important in spacecraft. So if we have something smaller that the crew might be able to utilize, that can potentially help us venture out even further into the solar system. So science is really the name of the game when it comes to the International Space Station. Some of the other science highlights that took place during this increment that are particularly interesting to me was we had the first wooden satellite that was deployed. This is a study to see if other materials might be more...
So someone asked how long until they can basically sleep in their own bed. What happens once they land? And after splashdown and recovery, they end up they end up on a helicopter, and that helicopter takes them to shore. And once they get there, of course, they go and fly into Houston. Once they hit Houston, then they go through all of their checks over at JSC, the home base. So you're looking at probably about 5.5 hours time and from splashdown. And if all goes well and health checks go through good after that, then they should be with their loved ones in a short period of time. So figure about 5 to 5.5 hours from splashdown to the helicopter ride to Houston, then back over to the JSC home. Anyways, hopefully some of that
Recovery
helped.
team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature that Dragon will experience upon reentry is 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. This
That's why
blackout
plasma
period,
is
as I
pouring
said
off.
before, we expect it to last about 7 minutes today, concluding at 5:51 p.m. Eastern Time or 2:51 p.m. Pacific Time.
2 more minutes of blackout.
We have our first view
Here we go.
of Dragon
Here we go.
Freedom coming home to Earth.
Sweet.
And that
Nice.
view is from the WB-57, which is one of NASA's high-altitude planes that is tracking. Now, because of the way that this camera is configured, it does look like it is dark, but it is indeed daytime, and you're beginning to see that plasma trail as Dragon re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. All of that is expected. We are anticipating an acquisition of signal around 2:51 p.m. Pacific Time, so just minutes from now, and you may hear the core begin to hail out or call Dragon for communications and see if we can potentially get communications with them a little bit earlier. Following this, we'll have 2 events in rapid succession. We'll have the drogue parachutes deploy at 2:53 p.m. Pacific, followed by the mains just 1 minute later at 2:54 p.m. Pacific Time, ahead of a splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific Time off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
Blackout, 1 minute left. Should start hearing comms soon. That might even be early. So any second
minute.
now.
Pretty incredible views of the Dragon spacecraft making its way home back to planet Earth with the Crew 9 astronauts on board. Once again, this view is coming from the WB-57 plane. That heat shield we can see doing magnificent work as it works to
Freedom, SpaceX, comm check.
All right, we're going to start hearing the SpaceX crew operations
Not yet.
resource engineer.
SpaceX
There they are.
Freedom is with you. 4.6 feet. Enjoying the ride.
There you go.
Copy that, Freedom.
Great news there from Commander Nick Hague reporting back.
We see a healthy flight computer. Expect automated chute deployment.
Freedom copies.
So the first shoot deployment
Like we said before,
is going to
things
happen in
moving
about 1
very
minute.
quickly
Around
as Dragon
53
Freedom
after.
makes its way home.
Hyperbolic chamber,
Next
not
event
necessary.
coming up will be deployment
Thanks,
of the
George.
drogue
Good question.
parachutes. This occurs around 18,000 feet.
GPS has converged. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deployment.
There you go.
We're about 2 minutes away from deployment of those drogue parachutes. Now the heat shield is continuing to work to slow the vehicle down. That entry period, the Dragon spacecraft went from orbital velocity about 17,500 miles per hour down to about 350 miles per hour. So it really gives you a sense of why that plasma builds up on the exterior of the capsule, thanks to the heat shield and the work that it does. Those drogue parachutes will slow it down from 350 to about 119 miles per hour. We can see
15 kilometers. Brace for drogue window.
We can see seat rotation happening inside the capsule. Great to get those first
see him?
views of our crew members.
He's checking on his belt. He's like, yeah.
50 miles per hour when the drogues are deployed. Those drogue parachutes that we manufacture here in-house are going to slow the spacecraft down to 119 miles per hour. And that is when we will see the main parachutes deploy, and that occurs about 6,000 feet above the ocean's surface.
That brings them down to like
And we are
10 to
expecting
15
drogue
miles per hour
deployment
on
at
landing.
2:53 p.m.
Somewhere there.
Pacific, so we should see it any second now. And there you are getting a great view
There
of
we
Crew
go.
9 inside Dragon Freedom as it returns back to Earth. We are awaiting the drogue deploys. This view coming from the WB-57 high altitude plane. And there you see it on your screen, drogue
There
deployment.
they are.
Descent rate nominal.
Sweet. Nice.
You can hear the crowd here.
Visual on 2 healthy drogues.
The crowd here very excited as Dragon Freedom continues to make its way back to planet Earth.
Beautiful shoots.
Next up, we'll stand by for the main deployment of the parachutes. The mains are quite a bit larger. You'll be able to notice the difference on your screen once they deploy, and they continue to ensure that the Dragon spacecraft slows down even further. As we mentioned, Freedom will be traveling 16 miles per hour when it splashes down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, here at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. And there we go.
We have visual on 4 healthy mains.
There you go. Sweet. Look at
That
that.
view was
Is
from
that beautiful?
inside.
Freedom copy.
That view was from inside one of the buckets where the parachutes are located. So we see a great view there of the reefing on those parachutes. And
Perfect.
as
Look at that.
those main parachutes begin to inflate fully.
That does not get old,
4
guys. That
beautiful,
does not get
healthy
old. It's
mains.
amazing. Once again, from 17,500 miles per hour to
Now
300
awaiting
miles per hour, then
visuals
finally
of
119
splashdown.
miles per hour, and now they're landing at probably 15
We'll start
miles
to
per hour.
hear Commander Nick Hague.
Copy 1,000.
As we heard right there, Commander Nick Hague will be calling out the altitude of the Dragon capsule from here on out. Landing in water is simpler and provides more margin against unlikely parachute issues. You can see those parachutes continuing to slow the Dragon capsule down.
And if you're just joining us, you're looking at
800 meters.
a live view of Crew 9, just minutes away from splashing down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Splashdown 2 minutes from now at 2:57 p.m. Pacific. We do have 4 healthy mains really doing the job there. Just breathtaking views of
Look
a
at that.
calm, glass-like ocean off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Crew 9 just minutes away from splashing down.
This is really such an incredible shot. That
Copy
was
600.
That was a live view from our recovery vessel, Megan, which is stationed a couple miles away from the splashdown site. We can see the crew there using their restraints as resting places for their arms. They were just in space moments ago, so their arms were able to float freely.
400 meters.
This is a gorgeous bluebird day here that we have for the splashdown of Crew 9. It's incredible to think that the Dragon capsule just minutes ago was going over 17,000 miles per hour, and now gently coasting to a soft splashdown.
200.
Copy 200 meters. Brace for splashdown.
As you can see there on your screen, continuing to monitor progress of the Dragon spacecraft. And we're going to stand by for splashdown
Look how
located
calm
in the Gulf of
the
America,
ocean is.
off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
Sweet. Sweet. There it is. There it is.
And
Touchdown.
splashdown. Crew 9 back on Earth.
It's awesome. That is awesome. Look at those chutes. Absolutely beautiful.
And SpaceX Freedom, splashdown. Good main release.
Copy, splashdown. We see main chutes cut. Nick, Alex, Butch, Sunny, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
It is an amazing, what a ride. I see a capsule full of grins ear to ear.
Unbelievable. Look at that. You could just see where it's just charred, right? Just charred. It's crazy. And they will reuse it.
And as you can see on your screen, we have visual confirmation of splashdown. Dragon Freedom has returned home, and NASA astronauts.
System safety verifications are in progress. We'll report back when recovery personnel are en route.
They're already en route, actually. You can see the speedboats coming.
And we're in section 2, 4.800 landing response. And
there they are.
Looking for your word on if it is necessary.
Once again, on
distance, we can
splashdown,
see
after the recovery
vessel
happens,
making
they
its
put on
way.
like this little
Copy, you're
platform to
in
get them
section
off.
2 for the
but-
environmental assessment in 4.800. That is not necessary today.
Oh, wow. That's nice. That's going to be even quicker.
Understand. Raising button.
All right.
So we will continue to have communications between the Corps and Nick Hague, the commander of Crew Dragon Freedom, which just splashed down 2 minutes ago off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Dragon Freedom has returned home with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunoff. They're back on Earth after approximately 17 hours of a return journey from space.
The SpaceX recovery ship and team have been waiting for Dragon's splashdown, and they will now make their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take them about
Planet of the
30
Apes.
minutes or so to make their way
And
to...
SpaceX Freedom. Pretty sure we're in stable 1.
Copy, stable 1. We see the same.
It's going to take about 30 minutes for the recovery team to make their way over to Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander, who are still seated and secured inside that Dragon spacecraft there on your screen. Incredible views there of that thermal protection system, or TPS. That Dragon capsule was pristine, white color before it departed the station, and we can see how the reentry phase,
Just burned up.
the thermal protection system did its job. Now, if you're wondering what that hole, that like bucket area is, that is underneath the side hatch. That is where the main parachutes were stored. So when we saw the Dragon capsule docked at station, it looked very different. The panel that protects and covers the main parachutes, that was still intact, as well as the panels that enclose
There
where
you go.
the
Now you can see
drogue
the
parachutes
speedboats
are
heading over
located.
to 'em.
We can see those fast
Freedom,
Three
boats.
boats.
SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in the next few minutes.
Freedom copies.
They'll be picking up the chutes.
We can see those fast boats. We weren't kidding when we said they were fast. While it does take about 30 minutes for the main recovery vessel to make its way over to the capsule, these fast boats will be doing a couple of things simultaneously. A couple of them are going to be working to retrieve the parachutes that you see in the background there of this drone shot. Those parachutes will be retrieved from the ocean surface. We want to make sure we are able to pull those out. The recovery vessel there closest to the spacecraft is going to be performing some safety checks. We can see there they're using an instrument that is basically working to detect if there are any
Toxic
hypergolic
gases.
vapors or fumes that are still residing in and or around the Draco thruster
That's where they're all
nozzles
masked
or
up.
outlets. The hypergolic fuel, which is necessary for on-orbit burns to maneuver the spacecraft. Unfortunately, those hypergolics are are unable to be breathed. They are toxic, and so this team here is doing those initial safety checks to make sure that it is safe for the rest of the recovery team to approach the spacecraft.
So after this, they're going to kind of
They're
position
also checking
things
to make sure that any residuals from the pyros are safe and are not going to cause any issues. We can see the team working their way around the spacecraft to do these basically these sniff tests on all of those Draco thrusters.
So it's about a 10-minute process to go through all of this.
And as we continue to await the recovery of our Dragon spacecraft with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov inside,
get the go-ahead.
Dragon has continuously, autonomously completed several
they don't
steps
have to
safe
blow out
itself
like
following
bolts or something.
splashdown.
You know, it's like old school.
We are
it's
continuing to see Dragon in what is known as stable 1 configuration. That's kind of the ideal configuration following splashdown. It's upright, and the Dragon capsule's in the right configuration for it to be hoisted into the recovery vessel Megan, which you do see a little ways off in your screen approaching. Dragon will continue to remain live on air with you through that recovery process, all the way through the point where the crew is extracted from the Dragon spacecraft. Now, if you are just joining us, the mission has gone smoothly so far. Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon.
Approximately 17 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn. This placed the Dragon spacecraft on a trajectory toward Tallahassee, Florida. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes
George, they're
to
more
slow
worried
the spacecraft
about,
down to a gentle splashdown.
We're
now going to follow
hypergolic propellants.
Freedom,
Is they're highly
hypergol
toxic?
sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC with SpaceX flight surgeon.
So there won't be any explosions. That's good.
And so what we did just hear there was communications that those hypergol checks were complete. They didn't find any of that upon those checks, so we'll continue to move through the timeline. Next up is a process called rigging, which you see happening right now on your screen. This is when a SpaceX recovery personnel actually works to climb aboard the capsule and work through procedures ahead of lifting onto the nest of the recovery vessel Megan. We heard it's going to be about 25 minutes or so until that lift actually takes place.
Okay, Freedom, the next call will be from the SpaceX flight surgeon on Dragon to Ground Private.
Understand. Thank you.
Callouts there indicating that the crew will have the opportunity to do a quick check-in with the SpaceX flight surgeon. This is standard procedure for every Dragon spacecraft when it returns to Earth. It's just an initial check-in, make sure everybody is doing okay. They will also have another check-in with the flight surgeon once they are on board that recovery vessel that you see there in the background. We can now see that SpaceX recovery team member they're on top of the Dragon spacecraft. They are going to be working to install plugs in the Draco thrusters to ensure that none of those, and to ensure that no more hypergolic fumes or vapors come out from the spacecraft. They'll also place harnessing around the spacecraft that are required in order to lift it out of the water.
Nice shot.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Continuing to get some views of the recovery personnel, both the main recovery vessel Megan, as well as some of those fast boats that we've discussed previously. It looks like just a beautiful day there out off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Weather was pristine. We were able to get undocked from the International Space Station as expected at 10:05 p.m. Pacific time yesterday evening, and Crew Dragon has since completed steps ahead of its splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific, and we're now stepping through procedures to get Dragon hoisted up onto the Megan recovery vessel and get the crew extracted out of the spacecraft. And you did see some of the parachutes that were near the spacecraft. Upon detection of landing, Dragon automatically releases those main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. Dragon then automatically safes any pyrotechnics that may still be present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts will remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps things temperature controlled inside the spacecraft so the crew remains comfortable, and the communication systems...
Freedom, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX, this is Freedom. We have loud and clear.
Copy that, Freedom. Have you loud and clear as well, and Dragon to ground is no longer private.
Understand, thank you.
As we saw there on the screen, we have a couple of fast boats in the recovery fleet that have quickly moved into the splashdown location. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upwind of the spacecraft. The two fast boats have very specific roles.
Yeah, John, they'll be able to use a finished bathroom soon. But my wife can't.
Do this for spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of those hypergolic propellant vapors. And this ensures that it is safe for the recovery vessel to approach Dragon. Once Dragon is cleared for full approach, as we heard is the case today, the team begins rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first one that makes the initial approach to the Dragon spacecraft. As we saw a little bit earlier, we were also able to see one of the recovery team members get on a jet ski to help gather up the parachutes that were automatically detached from the Dragon spacecraft upon splashdown.
And it will take a little over 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. Once complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted, and as you see, they are preparing for that to take place at this point. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team has climbed on top of the spacecraft already so they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect to the lifting lines. It will take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter. And if no additional medical assistance is needed, the crew will board a waiting NASA plane and depart for Houston.
There you go. So within an hour, they'll be on board, out of the capsule, ready to go, on a helicopter, back to mainland.
And as we continue to await Dragon to be hoisted up onto the
That's
ship,
a great shot
we
right
have
there.
a very special treat. NASA Public Affairs Officer Jaden Jennings, who is actually on the recovery vessel and had a bird's eye view of the splashdown today. Jaden, how are you? How was the view from the recovery vessel?
Hi, Sandra. How do you hear me?
I've got you loud and clear, Jaden. It's so great to hear you.
Awesome. So splashdown, Sandra, was nothing
Freedom,
short of
be advised.
spectacular.
We are transitioning the forward link. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Freedom comes.
Thanks so much, Jaden. We did just have some communications letting us know that we'll have about a 5-minute period where we won't be able to hear from the crew. So please go ahead, tell us, how was the view from the recovery vessel?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was mentioning earlier, splashdown was nothing short of spectacular. and we were stationed about 1.5 nautical miles away from the splashdown zone and had great visuals here on the recovery vessel Megan. We actually saw a little of the smoke trail as the spacecraft was coming in, and then moments later we spotted those drogue chutes, and this was quickly followed by 4 healthy white and orange main parachutes. We then tracked Dragon all the way down as it slowly propelled into the ocean, and I think I speak for all of us on the ship when I say a new core memory was made today, and we are looking forward to having Crew 9 on board with us a little later.
Jaden, that is amazing. Now, obviously, we are watching it here on camera, and the landing conditions look pretty good, but how was it from your perspective? What is the sea state out there?
Absolutely. So we've had optimal conditions for splashdown, and today it is sunny and 63 degrees outside right now with clear skies, light winds, and calm seas. The sea looks absolutely beautiful right now, and light blue with the sun reflecting from it. And Kay, I think the crew's going to like what they feel weather-wise on this picture-perfect day for splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee.
That's why they chose the Gulf instead of the Atlantic. So Atlantic is rough right now. The Gulf is like this. It's like a bathtub.
Sure. So one unique aspect of this recovery was the onboard training on station conducted for Butch and Sunny to ensure they were ready to return on a Dragon spacecraft. That training covered all aspects of their return, including nominal and contingency departures, deorbit burns, splashdown, and post-landing ops, which is what this team is preparing for now. As for the recovery teams themselves, we started the day taking a series of helicopters out to the vessel, and as standard, the recovery director and crew support teams were on that first helicopter out and took the time to get everything prepared on the ship. About 2 hours before splashdown, they deployed those fast boats and jet skis into the water. I was actually on the second helicopter out, and we were on the vessel about an hour and a half before splashdown and landed on top of the helicopter pad on the Megan. And the teams have been working diligently across their respective disciplines this week, executing what can only be described, in my point of view, as a logistical masterpiece, just ensuring every detail has been in place for Crew 9's return.
That is such great news. I'm so glad that you're able there to experience it in person. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what's next to retrieve the crew for the recovery personnel on board?
Yeah, Kate. So coming up next, Dragon will be hoisted into the on-deck translation system, or the nest, at the aft end of the ship, and then will be translated pretty quickly towards that egress platform. We'll perform another series of safety checks as final precautionary measures just to make sure there are no hypergolic vapors present before opening that side hatch. And then once that side hatch of the spacecraft is open, the crew will be assisted out of the capsule one by one from NASA and SpaceX.
Freedom, SpaceX, ComCheck.
Freedom's got you loud and clear.
Thanks, Nick. I've got you loud and clear as well. We have completed our forward link transition.
Yes, guys, after 287
And Jaden, if
days,
you
they're
did just
back.
want to go ahead and let us know what is next to retrieve the crew, we are continuing to get some great views on our screen, but I know you have an even better view yourself.
Oh, yeah, Sandra, this view is absolutely unbeatable. So just to kind of finish off what I was saying is once that side hatch of the spacecraft is open, that crew will be assisted out of the capsule one by one from NASA and SpaceX medical personnel, where they will then head to the med bay. And after those medical checks, they will get on that first helicopter out and arrive at the airport, where they will then board a NASA plane and then head back to Houston, Texas at the Johnson Space Center to begin their post-flight period. And we're eager to see the Crew 9 astronauts back on Earth, and we'll keep you updated on every moment of this process. With that, I'll toss it back over to you guys at Hawthorne.
So about 11
Thank
p.m.
you so
They'll
much.
end
That
up
was
with, they'll
Jaden
end up
Jennings,
at,
NASA Public
JSC.
Affairs Officer, who watched Freedom splash down firsthand from the recovery vessel Megan. Thanks so much, Jaden. So we are continuing to get these great views on our screen here of Freedom. As we mentioned, it splashed down at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. The recovery personnel are continuing to step through procedures to hoist Dragon onto the recovery vessel Megan there, which is now coming into view. You can see just how close Megan is at this point, and that's that helicopter pad that Jaden was just discussing, where the crew will fly off of onto the coast of Florida, and then eventually they'll fly back to Houston.
Just underneath that helicopter pad is that translation deck where we will see the nest once it is loaded up with the Dragon spacecraft on board. The nest will be translated to the forward end of the recovery vessel, and that is where our Crew 9 team members will egress from the Dragon spacecraft. Now, here on your screen, we can see
Isn't that beautiful?
Dolphins, actually, who want to come and play with Dragon. Now, one of the fast boats there in place, working to assist the recovery team member. It's incredible. I just love these views. We really see them even better in daytime, but just seeing the recovery team work.
The Dolphins are ready to play. The Dolphins are there.
To step through each operation. Obviously they're getting quick assists from the honorary part of the recovery team, those dolphins in the water there. Now, the recovery team member that is crawling around the Dragon spacecraft. Earlier we saw a view where it was like a spider monkey pose. We can see that individual now standing in the bucket where the main parachutes were stored while Dragon was on orbit. Obviously, those main parachutes were utilized for splashdown today. They were deployed and cut from the Dragon capsule, and one of the other fast boats of the recovery team working to pull those out of the water. Now, the recovery team member that is there working on top of the Dragon capsule. Earlier, we saw that person performing safety checks. Now we can see some harnessing being placed around the capsule.
Look at all the dolphins just playing. They love it.
Will be used to lift the Dragon capsule
like,
out
hey,
of the
what
water
are you guys doing
and
out here?
onto the recovery vessel. Wow, we got a cute little pod of dolphins. It wasn't just one or two.
I mean, that water just looks beautiful. We had ideal splashdown parameters today. Obviously, wave height, ne'er a concern. The weather is beautiful, as Jaden mentioned, in the 60s, sunny. Looking forward to seeing Crew 9 exit the capsule here shortly once they get hoisted onto the recovery vessel Megan.
We can see that recovery vessel slowly but surely closing the distance there between, dolphin cam back again. We can see that the Dragon capsule and the recovery vessel, that distance is closing. Again, this is just one more step as we continue to work recovery operations for Dragon Freedom, and we anticipate the lift of the Dragon capsule to occur here in just a few minutes. Now, once all of the rigging
radioactive
is
text,
on the
and I think the chutes are already pulled out of the water.
To the recovery vessel, we will see the hydraulic arm, which is that kind of like bridge-like structure there at the aft end of the recovery vessel. We'll see that articulate backwards. And,
thanks, George, for being here.
That's
Appreciate
a good sign that we're getting even closer to pulling the capsule out of the water.
George says dolphins protect humans. Amazing. They always do.
And the capsule will be placed inside of what you can see there is basically a basket. We call it the nest, Dragon nest, where that's where the capsule will be placed in order for it to be translated to the forward end of the vessel and for the astronauts to egress.
There they go. They got a line on it.
And before that does take place, we'll have potentially views of the rigger go ahead and jump off of the spacecraft there.
That typically occurs when the spacecraft is a little bit closer to the recovery vessel, and we usually get a really good view of that particular operation from one of the onboard cameras from the recovery vessel. That is an operation that I have a lot of respect and admiration for, that individual that does that.
So again, Dragon continuing to get closer and closer to the recovery vessel Megan. You see some of those ropes now coming into view as well. You are just joining us. Crew 9 splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, Sunny Williams, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunov. They're now working through procedures to hoist this spacecraft up onto the recovery vessel Megan.
We just saw that hydraulic arm get lowered into the lifting position. That arm will be the mechanism that is utilized to lift Dragon up and out of the water and into the nest located there at the aft end of the recovery vessel.
And the recovery vessel being used today is, as we mentioned multiple times, is named Megan, but that's actually after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur, who flew on Crew 2 a couple of years ago.
Just so you guys know,
We're
that
getting
capsule is
some
about
views now
12,000
from
pounds,
actually
13,000 pounds. So it's not
inside
light.
the boat.
That rigging is those
You're
arms
exactly
are
right.
pretty strong.
This view is straight
They run
down
about
the
13,000
recovery
pounds.
vessel. That platform that was closest to the camera, that is the egress platform.
Freedom, rigging is almost complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Sweet.
Great news there from SpaceX Core. So about 5 minutes left until we see Dragon Freedom get lifted out of the water. That hydraulic arm, as I said before, is the mechanism that will lift it. It's quite swift, actually, the whole process of getting the spacecraft.
Brace for capsule lift.
Bracing.
There it goes, Dragon Freedom being lifted out of the water and onto our recovery vessel, Megan.
The guy's using his Nintendo controller and getting it all lined up.
So once securely on,
Welcome aboard the recovery vessel.
There you go.
Recovery personnel are completing final checks and stand by for translation to the egress platform.
Freedom copies.
Great news there, letting us know that Dragon Freedom has been successfully recovered from the water's surface. If you've just joined us, we had an on-time splashdown at 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time, and we can now see that the water recovery operations are continuing to progress. The nest where the Dragon spacecraft is located is going to get moved forward. This will happen after one of the recovery crew members does some checks, and we'll also see some hosing. Obviously, the spacecraft splashed down in salt water. Salt water is corrosive, and we want to try and rinse out as much of the salt water as possible to reduce that corrosion on the metallic structures. So we can see some guidance there being provided, really steering the spacecraft properly into the Dragon's nest.
and it's been 30 minutes since Dragon splashed down, and as you can see there, the spacecraft is already on board the
quick.
recovery vessel Megan. Things continuing to move very smoothly today throughout the entire operations from the deorbit burn up until this point
Unbroken.
as well.
I do not know if they
And
have any
Freedom, it looks
specific
like
markings
the
on those
positioning
chutes
wasn't
that.
quite right, so they are working on repositioning the capsule in the nest now.
Yeah.
Okay, copy that. Thanks.
And with that, the team is just going
That's a good
to
point.
adjust the Dragon spacecraft
David
a bit
says
so that
first
it's in the right
astronauts to
position
land in the
ahead
Gulf
of
of
translating
America.
up a little bit closer ahead of the side hatch. So the team is now going to step through the procedures to ensure that that takes place.
While Dragon does fly itself autonomously, it clearly is unable to park itself autonomously. We want to make sure that the Dragon...
Once again, I want to say thank you to everyone for their super chats, and then also for Peter. He gifted memberships to some of you guys. If you got a free membership today, say thank you to Peter. I would appreciate that. If you guys have a question, put at JCristina before your question. Once again, at JCristina. It just makes it easier for me to find.
Once Dragon is fully seated in the nest, we'll probably see a bunch of that salt water come out from the bucket there located underneath the side hatch. See some salt water splash out. As I mentioned before, one of the recovery team members.
Yeah,
will
David, we should
begin,
call it the Gulf of Florida.
hosing down the
But it does go all the way to
spacecraft.
Texas. So, I don't know. I call it the bathtub. My daughter lives
So
on
you
the
are
Gulf.
continuing to get some great live views on your screen of Crew 9.
And the
which
water is
includes
like that
NASA astronauts
all the time.
Nick
Not all the
Hague,
time.
Sonny Williams,
But it
Butch
is like a
Wilmore,
big
and
bathtub.
Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunoff, who splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Now working to get that spacecraft situated in the nest. Just making
having
some
a hard
final
time.
adjustments and tweaks to ensure that it's nice and secure.
The amount
Once
of
the
burns,
spacecraft
burn
is
marks is crazy.
seated and secured and oriented correctly in the nest.
And again, they came in
Dragon will be
at
moved
17,500 miles per hour. It's crazy. 17,500 miles per hour. Then ended up coming down to 300 miles per hour. That's just due to the atmosphere.
The nest now. Team is working through hypergol sweeps.
Once again, down from 17,500 miles per hour down to 300 miles per hour, just using the atmosphere as braking. That's why you end up with all of that plasma pouring off it, and that's why you lose comms for those 7 minutes while it's slowing down, so to speak.
Basically right where this camera is located on, towards the forward end of the recovery vessel, that they will all be safe once the spacecraft is translated forward. So we're just doing some additional steps to make sure that the hypergolic propellant that is utilized for maneuvering the
Thank you,
Dragon
Robbie.
capsule
I will
while
take a
on
look at
orbit,
that email
making
later
sure
on.
that none of those
Most likely it'll be
vapors
tomorrow.
are still present on the exterior of the capsule.
Bradenton, 1994. Cool.
That's right. And there are a variety of individuals on board the boat that help with recovery operations. Not only do we have the recovery personnel that you see here, but we also have a doctor that will check out the crew members as standard procedure. As with any spacecraft that is returning from space, we always perform a medical check with the crew. So you will see the crew come out of the capsule and be placed on stretchers, just like with the Soyuz landing and with all of our Dragon splashdowns, that is the nominal procedure.
Gary, that's right. George says 16 miles
We'll
per hour.
stand by
That's
to
exactly
see
right.
if Dragon Freedom translate.
They have two sets. The first set of parachutes kind of slow them down from 300 miles per hour, let's call it, down to about 100, 119 miles per hour. And then the final 4 pop, and that brings them down from 119 miles per hour down to about 16 miles per hour on splashdown.
Which include Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbunoff, launched back in September from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So that will be the very first time that hatch is opened. Once docked to the International Space Station, crew enter through the top hatch, which was where the nose cone is now closed. That's the hatch that they actually utilize to go ahead and get inside the International Space Station. So as we get a little closer to that hatch opening procedure, you might start to see more individuals come into frame for some of that support. The ship has a maximum capacity of a little over 40 people on board, and it takes a variety of different roles, as we've discussed, to support. Also on board is the chief of the astronaut office for NASA, that's Joe Acaba.
Not too much longer, and we're going to see them pop out. Then once again, once they do come out and they are assessed, they're going to end up on a helicopter.
Now,
The helicopter will fly
standing
them
by
to the coast, and then they'll take a plane into Houston.
we see in the foreground. It is important to note that Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander will be getting assistance from the recovery teams while exiting the spacecraft. This is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members. As you could imagine, returning to a gravity environment can wreak havoc on our vestibular system, which is responsible for maintaining balance and motion. Of course, safety is our number one priority with this operation, so we'll see the crew members helped out of the spacecraft one by one, and they will be assisted the few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat.
And on board Dragon are 3 veterans space flyers. That includes Nick Hague, the commander, as well as Butch, Wilmore, and Sunny Williams. Alexander Gorbanov is completing his very first space flight on this mission, and he completed 171 days in space along with Nick Hague.
Yeah, so one of the questions that you guys had, let me see, Kelly had, is the SpaceX reuse the Dragon spacecrafts, and they do. All right, they take those. That's why they're rinsing them off right now with fresh water, getting the salt off because you don't want the corrosion. Salt just eats the hell out of everything, and it takes about 4 to 6 months for each one of them to be refinished, let's call it, or refurbished. There you go. That's the fresh water right now. They're going to clean it all down. So yes, they do reuse them.
Copy. And seal it.
We can see that spacecraft was successfully recovered from the ocean surface and is now being washed with fresh water, as obviously they splash down in salt water. So we're trying to rinse off as much of that salt water as possible. And we can see the spacecraft continuing to move closer and closer to that recovery deck.
Freedom, the crew is working on side hatch opening now. Expect hatch open in about 2 minutes.
Okay, copy that. And Kira, just wanted to say that you guys, you and the team did an awesome job, both uphill and downhill. Just really, really impressed. Thank you.
Nice.
Thanks, Nick. It's been an honor.
This is a pretty exciting moment coming up. We are working to open the side hatch. One thing that may not be obvious from, just looking at the spacecraft here is that this side hatch that we're about to open, the last time it was open was when this spacecraft was at the launch pad. This side hatch is what is used for initial capsule ingress and final capsule egress, but all comings and goings from the spacecraft while it is on board the space station are from the forward hatch, which is located at the top of the spacecraft under that nose cone. So this is a pretty exciting moment because it will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding their ships at the start of their journeys last year.
Fresh air, people. Fresh air. Soon
And the
to
very
come.
first person that will have the opportunity to say hello to the crew once that hatch is open is a SpaceX medical recovery personnel representative. Then we'll see procedures take place to remove the footrests of Dragon. That will just help the recovery personnel get a little bit more room to access the crew and help get them out of the spacecraft.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Safety is, once again, top priority here, and removing those footrests from all 4 seats will be helpful as a SpaceX recovery team member will actually go into the capsule.
That's a good question about the Abram tanks, and are the chutes about the same size as with the tanks? Because the tanks are probably like 120,000 pounds or something, which is crazy. But the difference is these are using 4 chutes, whereas the tanks, I believe, are using 8 chutes. So
exit the spacecraft safely. So yeah, we're gonna remove all
We're
four
here,
of those
guys.
footrests
Here we go.
to basically
We're coming
give a
out.
little bit more working room inside the spacecraft.
That's right. And we did hear the go for that hatch opening, so we're just a couple minutes away from being able to see that. And then we might be able to get the chance to see a couple of views inside of the Dragon and see the crew following their splashdown.
yeah, you could imagine the jelly legs you would have in zero gravity for 286 days, right?
The seal around the side hatch, as well as, we'll now see them open that side hatch up.
They're like, hey, do you have the key? I don't have the key. Are you sure you don't got the key? Amazing, it just pops off just with that little bit of a latch turn. It's crazy.
And there you
Considering what
have it. The
went
side
through,
hatch
right?
is open for the first time since September.
You got your medic going in, checking on everybody.
We can see some of the protective equipment there that was brought into frame that will help protect the edge of the side hatch. One, from any potential damage. Oh, we can see the recovery crew member there taking photos of the side hatch seal. This is part of the standard operation for recovery. These photos will get saved into our procedure. We'll then install that protective frame around the side hatch. This helps to ensure that the side hatch itself, the
Doesn't get damaged.
edges of it incur no damage while crew members are coming out from the spacecraft.
Once again, 4 to 6 months to refurbish this, to fly again.
If you missed it, there was also a recovery team member that went inside. So there are now 5 people on board the Dragon spacecraft.
Yeah, with the ISS, the Russians are not an enemy. For many years, when we had Obama as the president, and he basically decommissioned NASA, there was like there was nothing going up to the ISS. The only way for our people and for cargo to get to the ISS was through Russia. So we took a lot of trips with Russia to get there. So with the ISS, they are not an enemy. They are very much so a friend.
Egress or exit the
But now, once again, NASA is back, and we have SpaceX doing many or most of the launches.
area around the hatch and then remove the footrests. So we're a couple minutes away from seeing the crew egress, but not too long away.
I like it, Gary. A toasted marshmallow, basically, right?
We'll probably see
you can make a
those
s'more out of
being
it.
handed out here in the near future, as I mentioned before. Oh, of course, we got to get a well-documented photo of the moment. Although we can't see it from here, I'm pretty sure there are 4 smiles on board right now.
And we did hear that report out from the commander, Nick Hague, following splashdown that there were four smiles as far as he could see.
Yeah, capsule full of grins. Now, generally speaking,
There they are.
And there we do see Crew 9, some happy waves, smiles all around back on Earth.
They just had a really, really nice time on a very fast carnival ride.
generally
Pulling
speaking,
3 to 5
we,
Gs, which really isn't that much, considering they were
we
flying through the
have
atmosphere
the
at
individuals in the 2 center
17,500 miles per hour, right? 17,500 miles per hour is pretty quick. Once again, pulling 3 to 5 Gs, it's not too bad. They can take a lot more than that, probably close to double.
exiting the spacecraft. Generally speaking, we most of the time have the 2 center seats egress first, as it makes moving around inside the capsule a little bit easier.
Radioactive Texan, exactly.
The
Where's the key?
tablets that were previously located on the upper leg of the crew members. We can see those being handed out to the recovery team. Those were...
It looks like they were taking pictures, not with a Canon, a Nikon, a Fuji. It looks like they were taking pictures with an iPhone, guys. I don't know.
Those had to be stored and secured prior to dynamic operations.
It looks like we are starting to see the footrests also be removed. I just saw one there on the screen. There are 4, of course, 1 for each crew member.
Those footrests are made out of carbon fiber and are actually sized appropriately for each crew member, as everybody has different measurements and different leg lengths. Same goes for the armrests and the bucket length of each seat. We size those appropriately for the crew members and to ensure their comfort and safety.
Skitty Vaughn says it's a
I
pie
believe we just
phone.
saw the little ramp that is used to help slide the crew members out from inside the spacecraft.
I would love to see Elon make a pie phone, but no pie phone is in the works as of right now.
To a stretcher to go to a medical bay for medical checkouts. This is standard procedure for all Dragon spacecraft flights that splashdown crewed, as well as for our Soyuz spacecraft that land in Kazakhstan.
We could see the exterior of Dragon Freedom quite clearly in this shot, and it's such a beautiful sight. I personally prefer the capsule when it has some of that charring from atmospheric reentry. It is the signature sign of a capsule that has returned to Earth.
They're like, yeah, get off, quicker. We need to get our luggage. It is an amazing
Continuing to stand by
accomplishment,
for our
TJ.
first crew
Very
member
amazing.
to egress or exit for Dragon Freedom following their splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. Dragon undocked from the International Space Station at 10:05 p.m. Pacific just yesterday, so it was about 17 hours of phasing. And while on board the International Space Station, Crew 9 contributed to 900 hours of science, over 150 research experiments and investigations, making great use of the microgravity lab of the International Space Station, which celebrates 25 years of continuous human presence this November.
Looks like we're about to get our first crew member here upon egress of the Dragon spacecraft.
So we are standing by for that egress. Outside of Dragon, you do see one of those stretchers. This is the expected procedure, as the crew will be taken to medical facilities following their exit from Dragon.
There's one.
We can see folks on board clapping as our first crew member.
He's like, why
And
do
that
these
is
legs
NASA
feel like
astronaut
this?
Nick Hague, commander of Crew 9. Now out of Crew Dragon Freedom. Some smiles, thumbs up, and a wave. Can't get any better than that.
Yeah, that is one happy camper, that's for sure.
That's amazing, right?
As we said
Absolutely
before,
amazing. So,
it is
a
standard
really good
procedure
question
for
was,
all of our long duration.
were they specific seats and footrests flown up for the two astronauts that were returned? And the answer to that was no. So they used what was there. So even though they are specific for each person, they probably figured out which was best for each of them. And that's what they used. Yeah, getting off the spacecraft, basically waiting for your luggage with jelly legs. Yeah. I can't even imagine, 200
And we are standing by
days.
for the next crew member
Zero
to
gravity.
exit Freedom.
Yes, be sure to have your claim ticket ready to grab your luggage. There goes number 2. Who do we have now?
Next up out of the capsule, we expect Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. His first space flight. Spent 171 days in space alongside NASA astronaut Nick Hague.
Looks like we're getting some
171.
cheers and clapping on board as Alexander is slid down the little ramp and placed into the mobility aid. Again, big smile.
He's like, this is the best mobility aid I've ever sat in. Yeah, once again, the question was, isn't Russia our enemy? Why are we flying with Russians?
Astronaut Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore.
Here we go.
They completed
Sunny and Butch
286 days
coming out
in
next.
space.
Last but not least, right?
One of the remaining footrests being removed from the Dragon spacecraft.
And 286 days later,
As I said before, we
there you go.
generally try to have the crew members that are located in the 2 center seats aboard Dragon, and we like to have them egress first if possible, as it creates a little bit more movable working room inside the spacecraft. There is a recovery crew member inside that is helping all of our Crew 9 crew egress or exit from the spacecraft.
I don't know if I want to be a porter on Mars, but I guess, I don't know. I guess if you got many, what are you going to buy on Mars? I don't know. A sad day for Boeing, Andres Castro, absolutely. They should have brought them back. Boeing should have done it. Like I said earlier, this is a Boeing's fail. So it shouldn't have been about anyone but them. They should have been like, well, Elon, can you give us a hand? Here's a few $1 million. We got $4.6 billion from the government, from us taxpayers. Here's 10, 20, 30 million. Go bring them back. But they didn't do that. They remained silent. Shame on Boeing. Shame on Boeing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think that, just 5 years ago when we were doing the initial demonstration missions of the Dragon for Crew Dragon, that...
Guys, if you're not subscribed, consider doing so. I have about 450 videos about SpaceX and SpaceX Starlink that I put together, so check them out. There's a playlist. There's a whole playlist with everything, SpaceX Starlink and SpaceX. So I'm sure there'll be something there for you to check out. I have about 1,300 videos on this channel as of now. About 46 months I've been covering SpaceX Starlink. So
recently joined. The Dragon had an on-time splashdown. Oh, looks like we're getting our next crew member here.
There she is.
That is none other than Sunny Williams. Big smile, big waves.
Wow.
She, like her other crew members, now
Does she have a lot
will be
more gray
assisted
hair
onto
than I remember
mobility
her?
aid.
You know, she's got to be happy to see her family coming soon, considering she was only supposed to be away from her family for 8 days, not 286.
Certainly seems to be a theme among all recovery operations.
Absolutely. And of course, that leaves NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore inside Dragon in seat 4.
Last off. There he is.
We're getting some views of him now as he egresses or exits the spacecraft.
Welch and Sun Farms. Yeah, pretty soon you'll be able to carry nothing with you.
Once again, some
There he is. We made it.
elation and cheers there
That's
from
awesome.
Butch Wilmore. As we mentioned before, returning to Earth from coming from a microgravity environment can
There you
wreak
go,
havoc on
guys.
the body. So it is customary and just standard procedure for all of our long-term space residents to get assistance once they are back on board the recovery vessel.
That's a good question, Unbroken. Does Boeing have a Twitter or have an X account? I really don't know. But they should just be getting flamed right now. Just flamed.
Well, now
okay?
that Nick, Butch, Sunny, and Alexander are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the NASA medical team, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their return. The Crew 9 mission began a little differently than usual since Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams were already aboard
let
the
them
space
give a
station
wrap.
when Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanoff arrived on the Crew 9 spacecraft in September. Having arrived as the crew flight test crew for Starliner, Wilmore and Williams were fully incorporated into the space station's Expedition 72 team and began research and other work aboard the station along with the other crew members. Williams commanded the orbiting laboratory for much of the expedition. After a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9, Nick and Alexander made a short flight on board Dragon to the International Space Station. Veterans of long-duration space station missions, both Williams and Wilmore conducted spacewalks during their 9 months in space. Like all crews on the station, Crew 9 had the ability to leave at any point had there been an emergency. With their full duration mission coming
Important
to an
point
end,
there.
the crew
You heard
began
that.
packing up their personal items for their return to Earth about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with Crew 10 teams as they arrived a few days ago.
Their journey home began about 17 hours ago when they closed the forward hatch to Dragon and undocked from the space station at 10:05 p.m. Pacific, 1:05 a.m. Eastern. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn to line up their orbit, Nick, Butch, Sunny, and Alexander rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for re-entry this morning. We jettisoned Dragon's trunk and performed our final on-orbit maneuver, the approximately 7.5-minute-long deorbit burn, and that occurred at 2:11 p.m. Pacific, 5:11 p.m. Eastern Time. And that sent Dragon on its path home. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 main parachutes, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific, 5:57 p.m. Eastern. Following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery experts move in and prepare Dragon Freedom for its lift onto the recovery vessel. And just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities, safe and sound.
Next up, they'll catch a helicopter flight back to shore, where they'll transfer to aircraft that will take them home. The astronauts will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston, where they'll be reunited with family and friends to bring an end to this mission. It's been an honor and a privilege to share their journey with all of you as we continue this new era in human spaceflight.
Return today marks the end of the direct handover we executed after successfully launching the Crew 10 mission to the space station just last week on Friday, March 14th. Thank you, as always, for joining us for tonight's coverage of the splashdown of Crew 9. Remember to follow SpaceX on X and NASA online and on social media.
There you have it, guys. There you have it. Amazing, right? Absolutely amazing. Because if you think about it, this was one of these events that when you look at how far they've come in those 286 days and all of the controversy and everything that you've heard and all of the BS, I'm eager to hear what both of these astronauts kind of have to say. Elon Musk, I think, put it really well. He was on Ted Cruz's show, I think it was like a night or two ago or something, and he said, each one of these astronauts is going to have a different take on their 286 days. One is a Democrat and one's a Republican. So they're going to look at it completely different. So I think it's going to be interesting to hear what they have to say, Do they fall in line or do they kind of voice their opinion? But in short, I really do believe that the loser here is Boeing. Boeing had a capsule that failed, which is okay. It was an inaugural flight, and it's okay that it fails. We see SpaceX fail all the time, but they learn continuously, right? It's iteration, 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 blow things up, and then innovation. Once again, we went from a Block 1 SpaceX Starship to a Block 2 Starship. Changed up a lot. So the same thing holds true here. I just don't know if Boeing is going to get a second chance or not. Because once again, they took like 4.6 or 4.8 billion, that's with a B, a big capital B, $4.6 billion from U.S. taxpayers, from the government. And they made a ship that failed. And it's okay, once again, that it failed. But in my personal opinion, I do believe that they should have stepped up and brought those astronauts back after they were left there for a month or two to see if they can figure out why there was the 5 helium leaks and why were 5 or so of the propulsion systems of the thrusters not working out of the 28. Why? Okay? They weren't able to figure this out, well, until later once they let's say, deorbited and come back autonomously without them on board. And they found out that, yes, it was due to heat and the seals that ended up causing a problem. Okay, so now they can fix those problems. But no matter how you look at it, they're the ones that should have stepped up and said, listen, we're going to bring those astronauts back ourselves. It would just make them look better. The problem that I have with it is that mainstream media didn't even talk about it. Right? Almost like Boeing just, I don't know, they just fell out of the loop. They got a press pass, as they call it, a pass from the press. And all of a sudden, all of the attention went to Elon Musk and to the president. And why is this happening? And, and all of this stuff. So, in my personal opinion, Boeing is the loser here. SpaceX ends up, once again, saving the day. Could this have been done earlier? Yes, it could have been done if Boeing would have stepped up. It could have been done if the Biden administration said it was okay for Elon to go and bring them back. I also stated in my video today that it was not a rescue and they were not stranded. This is just mainstream media just calling just nonsense, as they always do. Like I made an analogy. It was kind of like two people that were on a boat that went to a deserted island somewhere to do research. And when they got to this island, their boat sank. The question is would they be considered stranded or marooned at that time? Yes, it would be. They would be if that island didn't have food, water, shelter, and also an emergency boat to leave the island. And that is what they had when they reached the ISS. So were they marooned? Were they stranded? No, they weren't. But Boeing did leave them high and dry. They should have been brought back once again after that first month or two when they went from pilot, co-pilot to engineers, which isn't even their duty to be. But they did. So that's my take on it. Everyone has a different take. And of course, it's highly political and people, on one side will go one way and the other side. I try to take it right up the middle. I give you the facts and then I let you guys judge. What do you think about it? Because if you turn on mainstream media right now, it's going to be this whole show going on that they stranded, they were rescued and, praise and all the rest of the stuff. And yes, it is. But once again, it is not a rescue and they were not stranded. Okay, because the date that they came home was the date that I reported on, August 7th, 2024. That date of the end of February to the beginning of March is what I said. And then on the 20th of August, 2024, NASA said the exact same thing. And they put that the official announcement saying we're going to be bringing them back with the Crew 9. And that is 6 months because that's how long these missions are. They are 6 months long, period, end of story. So they're going to be there for those couple of months plus the 6. So 8 months later, and they are on land. Thankfully so. So anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed the coverage. I had a lot of fun with this. We always do the JC Lives on Fridays at 8:30. Usually Fabiola's here with me, but she had to work tonight, so she wasn't here with me. Hopefully, she'll be here on this Friday. We will see. We will see. Anyways, thank you so much for being with me today. If you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. If you like the coverage, throw the video a thumbs up. Share the channel with your friends and family and everyone else. Maybe Reddit or Facebook or wherever you frequent, whatever social media you're on. Share the channel, share the video. I would really appreciate it. It'll help grow the channel. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. Many blessings to each and every one of you, and we will see you most likely tomorrow with another video. Take care, guys. Enjoy.